welcome everyone to our property market update with Providence Property. We've got Jay and Lynton joining us today. So Jay's joining us from MA office and we've got Lynton joining us online. So thank you both for your time today. Providence, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Providence Property are a buyer's agent with over 20 years experience. Saw that you guys were 2006, which is awesome. Happy 20-year anniversary.
Yeah, thank you.
And a presence across nearly every capital city in Australia. So are very well placed to share what's happening on the ground right now. Today's session is really about giving you a clear view on what's happening in the market right now. So we'll be unpacking how buyers are behaving, how quickly deals are moving, what's influencing decision-making at the moment. We'll also touch on the impact of global events, government policy changes and interest rates, and where investors are currently focusing. Most importantly, we'll look at how broker and buyer's agent relationships can work together more effectively and support clients in this environment. Just some housekeeping. If you've got any questions throughout the session, feel free to pop them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen and we'll cover as many as we can at the end or throughout. We'll also be sending you a recording of today's session with your CPD point information to everyone who attends, so keep an eye out for that tomorrow. Let's get into it. Hand over to yourself, Jay and Lynton. Let's do this.
Yeah, let's go. What do we want to talk about first?
I think we'd love to know some background about you both and what Providence Property is currently doing at the moment, how you're supporting your clients.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's go through it. So hopefully everyone can see the screen. So Lynton, myself and Simon Harris Lynton and Simon started the business back in 2006. So before buyer's agency was really a concept or as common as it is today. In Australia, and our mission is to help our clients create distinctive, lasting and substantial improvements to our clients' income and asset position through property with ease, direction and confidence. And that's just a fancy way of saying we really just want to help people be able to grow their wealth through property. We're the experts in that area, and it's really about no sleepless nights. We don't buy in quite a few areas, and I'll go through that in a moment to just explain why we're a bit different from some other buyers agents. Not everyone's going to want to buy in the same locations. So at the end of the day, for us, it's important to know what our limitations are as a business, what we do and what we don't do. So if you do have a client that you think you might want to refer to a buyer's agent, it's good to make sure they're the right fit. So we're a national business, as you said, established back in 2006. We've done over 3,500 transactions nationally, $203 billion in property. 59% of those properties are off-market and pre-market, and I'd love to talk more about that later because there's a lot of misconceptions about off-markets. 70% of our purchasers are investors and about 30% are owner-occupiers. We're Australia's most professionally referred and trusted buyers agency, and we work with a myriad of companies like Telstra, Accenture, EY, Mortgage Choice, NAB, KPMG, SAP, ANZ, PepsiCo, etc. So these companies typically refer clients to us to assist those clients in purchasing property faster. In regards to our investment methodology, and this is probably quite important in regards to our personal identity as a business, we're capital city focused. We don't buy in regional areas. Lots of people are buying regional. Great, that's awesome. It's just not something we do as a business. We've got a lot of data behind why we don't do it. If we are buying something, it's got to be about less than 65 minutes or an hour or so commute to the CBD or near water. We avoid regional, rural, agricultural, holiday, letting areas and mining areas. It has to be close to employment drivers. Employment is the main catalyst for population growth. So because of that reason, we want to be around employment so that it affects supply and demand correctly and consistently. And then higher income demographics are always important to us too. Can these people manage owner-occupier loans and investment loans? Close proximity to amenities such as schools, parks, cafes, transport. Supply and demand is important, understanding that dynamic. Vacancy, days on market, renters versus owner-occupiers, gross rental yields. There's so much data now that you can get at your fingertips that, when realestate.com was just printing newsletters that you couldn't get. So it's really important to have that information. We do prefer houses over apartments, but I would say as affordability is changing, more and more people are looking at location and apartments and things closer to the CBD. And we do prefer quality over quantity. So if a client comes to us with a $1 million budget and they're like, oh, can I buy two? We'd probably prefer them to buy one good product. There is a lot of data around combined cities versus combined regional areas. This is 30 years worth of data. A lot of the data we're seeing being quoted over the past decade now is really, a lot of it is been diluted by COVID, which was, basically 5 years of government grants and printing money. So you really do need to look at the longer data sets. And we can see here again that combined regional areas compared to combined capital cities just didn't perform as well over the last 30 years. You've had this black swan event like COVID, which has sent those numbers up significantly for regional. And then we just have a bit of a fear of those clients trying to buy in a regional now at that very peak of the market. Is that going to make sense? We're already seeing the banks reflect that with blacklisting certain suburbs and locations anyway. So that's kind of doing the job for us. But I think the reason why a lot of people are attracted to regional is because the rental yields are high. My question to those people is always, why is someone willing to spend 6 or 7% in rent when they could own it for 6% or less potentially as an owner-occupier paying that interest component? And it's typically because they're not there for the long term, or they don't want to be there, or because the percentage of renters is higher than the percentage of owner-occupiers. And why is that the case? So again, it's just questions that I think are important. How do we choose what property to buy, or which locations, which suburbs? So after we've figured out the capital city, in the specific state that we like, then we look at long-term data, so 30 to 45 years of historical data, and we cross-reference it with short 5 to 10-year data gaps to see what the trend is now and what the trend has been overall and when it will return to that trend. And just kind of lastly on that, if we can achieve an additional 1% by choosing a better property, that can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional profit for clients. And this is why we combine cutting-edge technology with local experts. And that's a huge thing, is having people that are on the ground that actually know the market and live there. And that really helps us get that leg up. And you can see the difference between getting a 5% return and an 8% return is over $1.5 million. Like, that's quite significant and definitely changes things for people in the long run. So yeah, I've got lots of other stuff to go through, case studies, examples, but I'm going to let you kind of lead that and we can figure out what we want to talk about next.
Beautiful. So I've got a few questions on this one.
Please.
There was a 30% owner-occupied versus a 70% investor that you guys are seeing on your split at the moment.
Yes,
for us, yes. Do you think with your business and how things are going, is that going to increase? Do you think on the owner-occupied side, people are needing more support in general with a buyer's agent to support them in that journey? Yeah,
it's a great question. We are seeing that. We are seeing more owner-occupiers are time sensitive, I guess, when it comes to purchasing property, and they are certainly coming to us with that. One of the trends we're probably seeing more than that, though, is people abandoning the owner-occupier approach and going, I'm actually going to rent where I want to rent, and I'm going to buy an investment property in a place where I can afford, where it's not going to kill me financially, emotionally, etc. So we're seeing a rent vesting trend, which is becoming more and more prevalent. And I think especially with the upcoming generation and the next generation from us, I think that's going to be something that you're going to see more of. The old adage was, if you're in Sydney, as an example, I'll buy a property in an area far away from the CBD as a first home buyer. I'll live in it to get the grant. And then as soon as I've got that grant, I move out and I rent it. The problem is that you can't do that anymore, because even the areas that we used to think weren't that great or weren't desirable to live,
still costing me lots.
They're spending over $1 million. And the problem too is Sydney, as an example, and I'm just using Sydney here. I know we're national, but the rental yields are terrible. They're 3.1%. And if you're paying 6.5% interest component, that's before rental management fees, insurance costs, strata, etc. And as well too, for this is why investing is still more attractive, because at least you're getting those tax benefits.
Exactly.
Or you may or may not be, we don't know yet. The data is going to come out next week, but that's definitely something that we are seeing. The only thing that I can say is owner-occupiers always take a lot longer to buy, because it is an emotional process.
Yeah.
Investors are much more based on the logic, the return. We've had clients say no to the perfect property because they didn't like the color of the splashback.
Wow.
Yeah. So I certainly think it's becoming a little bit more acceptable for people to use a buyer's agent now to do it. But as I said, I'm curious to see how that trend's going to change with the affordability changes.
Perfect. And based on the data you've got now, I think it'd be really interesting to go through exactly what benefits there are with a broker working with you. I know from a time and pipeline perspective, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got some data. So it's going to be messy, everyone, me skipping through these because I got to come back, but let's have a look. So as an example, just anecdotally, we've been doing this for 20 years. So if you're giving someone a 90-day pre-approval, right? They've got 12 weeks. They're not doing all 12 weeks in a row of open inspections.
Yeah.
You'd probably go insane if you did, right? And we got lots of people with kids and stuff like that. It's very difficult. So you look at this and you say, okay, so I'm doing maybe 50% of those. So 6 weeks out of the 12, I'm doing inspections. Based on the data from realestate.com, we're seeing that the average person is inspecting about 2 properties per weekend. So that by the time they've finished that stage of looking at that 12 weeks, they've seen about 12 properties.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of properties. You've also got to remember the client is consuming dozens of properties every day on their phone.
Yeah.
So now what's happening is what they're seeing on their phone is not matching what they're seeing in reality, because they're seeing these airbrushed images of this property in Glebe with the fake lawn, and you've got this purple sunset from Tuscany and stuff like that does not belong in Glebe, but it's there. And then people are getting there and they're looking at these photos and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, all these fisheye lens shots of this 2x2 bedroom that looks like a hall. So they're seeing that, so they're already emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
And then on the weekends, they're seeing these properties and they're getting more frustrated. And they're in a bathroom looking at tiles with 6 other people. And it's just not a fun process. And this is why a lot of clients need to give up. Mental health is obviously a big thing lots of corporations talk about these days. But we see clients start, and typically, like I said, if they don't do 6 weeks, which is half of those 12, they're not doing these 6 weeks in a row either. They probably do 2 or 3. They overexert themselves. Yeah. They take a break for 3 weeks, and then they might do another one peppered by another one if they don't have a family event or something on the weekend. So the client gets very tired. So the prospect of, hey, you've had 90 days, how many properties have you seen? And it's like, oh, we saw 12. Okay, great. Out of those 12, how many of them were actual contenders? Like how many of them were properties that you'd probably buy? And the data shows that out of those 12 properties, they fall into kind of 2 camps. 50% are either too expensive or they don't suit the buyer. That's typically buyers when they first start, they're looking for the unicorn, like they're looking for that property that, imagine if we got it for this price, and we are not in a buyer's market, we're in a seller's market. So they waste time doing that. Then you've got the other 50%, which is the other 6 properties out of the 12 remaining. And typically they either require major renovation. And prior to COVID, Aussies were very much renovation can-do people. The cost of renos now, as anybody can probably attest to, has just gone through the roof.
Skyrocketed, yeah.
We had so many clients during 2022, we probably started seeing the trend more where they had deposits they were going to use for a renovation and they reversed those into investment purchases instead. So they used the deposits for that. So that's a big thing. Or there's maybe 3 out of those 12 that are ideal, but now the problem is the competition is going to be the hardest on those 3.
Because the other 20 people at that inspection.
Exactly correct. Too. So it's no wonder the client gets to a stage where they have fatigue, where they're exhausted, but also where they need a reality check. And that's probably the biggest thing I think as buyers agents we do for clients. We're not trying to sell a dream in any way. We've been around for 20 years, so we're very comfortable in our own skin, but also at the same time, we're comfortable. I'm not trying to say this in an arrogant way. We're comfortable to tell people they're probably not the right fit for us.
Yeah.
And the reason we say that is because at the end of the day, we never want to take on a client whose brief is so unrealistic that we know it's just going to end in tears anyway. So when we work with mortgage brokers, the big thing is to really qualify the client as best we can. And we actually did a presentation for MA Money a little while back where we wrote down our top qualification questions that we ask as a business. Happy to share that with everybody on the webinar. They can check that out later. But these questions really help us to figure out, is this client going to buy something, or are they going to fall into that category, which I'm sure a lot of the brokers listening today would know, where their pre-approval is the beginning and the end of their property journey. They're not actually going to buy something, but they believe that from that social pressure, I need to get that pre-approval. And they love telling people, oh, we're pre-approved. It's like, oh, that's great. That's great to know. But where is that actually taking you? And these people are just happy wasting their broker's time asking for dozens of CMAs. Oh, I want you to do a CMA on this for me. I want you to do a CMA on that for me. But they're never going to buy any of these properties. So for us, it's all about working in tandem, talking to your teams about your current conversion rate, and then looking at our conversion rate was really interesting because you guys are around that 30% odd mark, and we're based on our stuff around that odd 60 high percent odd mark. And that's where those two combinations together get those clients more across the line once they get an idea of reality.
Yeah, two-pronged approach to get a successful outcome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. No, that's very informative. And it is, one of those things I've gone through recently as well, where you go to the property and you go,
Oh.
imagine if it was 300K less. Amazing.
Well, on that, just very quickly, sorry, the data actually
Here we
shows
go.
that buyers are getting into the market a bit quicker than what they were last year, which was 2025. They took 4 weeks less than what they took in 2024. And then you can actually see the states at the bottom and how long it's taking people to get in. So if you've got a pre-approval for someone that's lasting 90 days, but you know the average Aussie is taking 40 weeks or 10 months to buy a property, you get a much better understanding of how long the journey is actually going to be.
Yeah.
As a mortgage broker, you can't get them to buy faster. It's not really going to happen. It's up to their own pace. And if you can see the average Aussie is taking this long, again, they're going to be in ebbs and flows of when they're happy, when they're not happy, what they're finding. But the important thing to us is to then, and this is something we'll talk about a bit later, work out how much money they're actually losing every week they're not buying a property.
The opportunity cost.
That's correct. And that's the thing a lot of people don't realize. And once they get a reality check of that, we find the motivation clicks in their head and then they start pursuing property with a little bit more gravitas around, I need to buy this.
Yeah, it's costing me money not to do this, make
Absolutely.
a decision.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So based on the personal side of a buyer's journey, what are some other external pressures that you're seeing out there in the environment that may or may not be affecting us in the future? I know that there's been a big announcement.
Yeah. Oh, my Lord. So obviously there's lots of speculation about what Jim Chalmers is going to talk about next Tuesday when we discuss the budget. I personally, and I'm just going to say it now, I think this is going to be one of the loudest starting guns to what's going to be the fastest race for people to buy property that we've probably seen in half a century. And that's very opposite to maybe what some other people think. A lot of people are like, oh, it's doom and gloom, it's over for property, etc. I've got a feeling they're going to grandfather whatever changes they made, what they make. And when they do, they're going to say, you've got from this time to buy before these policies take effect. And I think that's just going to get people going, I need to buy as quickly as possible. And they're going to run to their broker and say, yeah, I don't care if interest rates have gone up. I don't care if my borrowing capacity's dropped. Properties are probably going to keep going up. What can I get? So we can go specifically into each one of those policies, what they're proposed, what we think the changes are going to be, if you like. Or we can do whatever you want. But yeah, you just let me know and then I've got the data.
Let's have a look at that. That's
okay,
awesome.
Great. Okay, so let's get here. So let's go to capital gains tax and negative gearing. So again, this is still very speculative and this is based off what I think is most likely to happen. Even with capital gains tax, they've recently talked about changing again from the original, what they were talking about, dropping the percentage to going back to an indexed style type of charge as well. So that keeps changing, but based on the rumours that are a little bit more firm, let's just look at that. So first we'll look at negative gearing. And I'm not going to explain what negative gearing is. I'm sure all of you know how negative gearing works, but I have done a video on it. So if you need this part for your client, absolutely, I'll send it to you guys and you can check it out. But the main thing here is that for negative gearing, they want to limit it potentially to 2 investment properties. So anyone's got a third property or more, you're not going to get those benefits on that third property, fourth property, fifth property, sixth property, etc. So that's what they're looking to do. And I think it's really important because people are saying, well, what do you think is going to happen? And I find that there's no better teacher than history. Yep. So what I did is I actually went back and I grabbed some of the articles from 1985 when during the Hawke government, they actually implemented, they took away negative gearing. And very similar consumer sentiment to what we have now, which is like people were finding it hard to get in the property market. They were complaining to politicians saying, you know, these greedy landlords are the reason I can't do it. And you know, again, I feel sorry for people that can't afford properties, but at the same time, I have a significant amount of empathy for those people that are buying investment properties because every property they buy as an investment is actually a home for a rental family, right? And yes, they're doing it because they ultimately want to make money. But at the end of the day, anyone who's taking advantage of negative gearing is losing money. So this is not something, and the data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that over 80% or 70% of those who are negatively gearing have an income of less than $80,000. So these are not rich people, okay? And the data also shows out of all of the Australians that have investment properties, 40% of them, give or take, are the ones that take advantage of negative gearing. Because a lot of people that don't need negative gearing, they've just got outright paid properties. So if we look at this data, the interesting thing about it I've got two articles here. One's from the 14th of March, 1987. And that was a front page of the Sydney Morning Herald. And it just says rents are too high. So what happened is when they took negative gearing away, in the first 12 months, rents increased by 25%. So the interesting thing there was the people that were complaining about these greedy landlords then did an about face and then complained about how those landlords that were left were increasing their rents. But the reason is because there were less properties on the market that were available for rent. So instead of having, 3 or 4 families showing up to an open inspection for a rental property, you had 20 families showing up. And these people that never wanted to get into the property markets or never wanted to attend an auction are now attending silent auctions where they're offering an extra $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60, $100 per week to get the property. And they didn't like that. So after less than 24 months, these people all went back to the government expressing their concerns about it. And Paul Keating was the treasurer at the time, and he actually reversed the entire policy.
Wow. And it seems like something very similar now.
Well, my concern is if they did it today, we certainly have worse vacancy rate levels than what we had back in 1985. The cost of construction has gone up tenfold since 1985. The amount of skilled workers that we have to do the work to create those properties has dropped quite significantly. And our population growth based on the new immigration policies is significantly higher. So if this took 24 months to reverse back in 1985, I would only expect it would be an even shorter period of time for them to reverse this now.
Yeah.
So that's the negative gearing side. And then if we just look at a little bit more of that data, so based on the recent ATO data, around 49% or 1.28 million of the 2.26 million property investors are negatively geared. So 50%, right, are negatively geared, which means another 50% or 51% don't take advantage of it.
Exactly.
At all. So when we look at that, 60% of the investors have a taxable income of $80,000 per year. So again, these are just people that are trying to get into a position where they don't have to rely on the government later on when they go to retire. And if the government keeps taking these benefits away, the problem is they're kicking the can down the road because a whole generation is going to go to retire. And because they were discouraged to invest, they're going to go to the government with their hands out and say, well, can you take care of me now?
Yeah.
And the government's going to say, well, we can't afford that. And they're going to say, well, you took all of my money to stop me from investing. What are we going to do? So I broke down those numbers and you can actually see 71.48% of the 2,245,539 Australians that own investment properties have one. That number drops so significantly from nearly 71.5% to 18.86% that own two. Then that drops again significantly by nearly 75% to now only 5.81% of people own three. Then that drops again by more than half to being only 2.1% own four. Then less than 1% own five. And again, another less than 1% own six. So I actually calculated these numbers. And if you wanted to take away negative gearing from anyone that owns three or more properties today, and you didn't grandfather it, you just said, as of today, you don't get the benefits, it affects about 217,368 Australians, of which 50% of them probably don't even negatively gear.
Yeah.
So I can't see, based on that change, how it's actually going to help the market. I think the changes will be, you'll get a storm before the storm, meaning people rushing to buy properties. Then you'll get lending be impacted because obviously once the policy comes into place, the banks are going to say, well, we can't take that negative gearing into account anymore. So we'll probably drop your borrowing capacity. Property supply, I'm assuming it'll be grandfathered, but at the end of the day, people are just going to hold on to their assets for longer. So national listings are already 15% below the 5-year average, with some capital cities being 30% below. So all I can imagine is there's going to be less stock on the market. And then finally, from a rental perspective, we saw rents increase by 25% when they did this back in 1985. And FYI, since 2020, rents have actually increased by 44% in Sydney specifically, but they've gone up even more in other capitals. So to add maybe another 25% increase on rents today, I think Aussies would be in front of Parliament House with pitchforks and torches.
Yeah, ready to take them on.
Yeah, it does not make sense. So that's the negative gearing side. And then we've got capital gains tax. So do you want to talk about that next, or do you want to keep talking about negative gearing?
I think on the negative gearing side of things, with the changes that could not happen, how that's going to affect people, what do you think brokers could be doing differently to position their customers in a way to be prepared for this change?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think understanding the amount of properties that your clients own is the first thing. And most brokers are pretty good at that, but always asking them, I think it's a great way to figure out if your client has any properties with other lenders or other brokers that you don't know about. And you'd be surprised how many loyal, great clients actually have properties that you don't know about. We see it all the time. So I think finding out how many properties they have and if this particular policy is going to affect them is the first thing, identifying that. But secondly, I think it's about educating the client, because a lot of people are freaking out about this, thinking that I'm going to have to sell properties, etc. They don't understand the history and how the market worked. So I think educating the client, or saying you need to speak to someone who is educated about this before you make these decisions. Because as I said, the way the media is kind of positioning this at the moment is very doom and gloom, whereas because I've seen the historical side of it, I see it as a way for me to make a quick 20-odd% capital growth on my investment portfolio over the next 12 months. Yeah. So I actually think it could be quite a good thing. And also as brokers, I think planting that seed for clients and saying, if this does happen, and if they do grandfather this could be one of the best chances for you to make money. If you are an investor and that's your mindset, you should be exploring that as well. So let's do a stress test now on your borrowing. Let's figure out if we needed to jump in, because I'm pretty confident that if this does happen, banks and brokers are going to get smashed with requests for finance. Yeah. And I think the actual approval process is going to take even longer. And I would use that bit of fear to inject into my clients and say, let's start getting your stuff ready now. We don't have to do anything, but why don't you get me everything ready so I can at least do a serviceability calculation and figure out, are you in a position? And once we hear these announcements next week, let's figure out if we should pull the trigger and if you should start looking for something.
And if it's an opportunity rather than something to be concerned about.
Exactly, right? Correct. They've got nothing to lose by doing that. So I think the education side of just having that candid discussion with the clients, in my opinion, is a good way just to position yourself, not as a source of rumor, but as a source of reason.
Yeah, awesome. I think that was a really good cover off of the negative gearing, which kind of flows quite nicely into the capital gains.
Yeah, so CGT, and this is interesting because the negative gearing side, remember, if you've got super clients, at the moment it seems like they're kind of immune to the majority of this. But at the same time, in self-managed super funds, you're taxed at a 15% rate anyway, so the negative gearing doesn't really give you those huge benefits. But if we're talking about CGT, the CGT is going to affect you whether you have 2 investment properties, 3 investment properties, 4 investment properties. They're kind of saying this is going to be everything. And again, I won't explain capital gains tax. I'm sure you're all very intelligent and know it, but I did do a video on that too. So the rumor is that the government wants to reduce the current discount of 50% to around 33%. And for those of you old enough to remember, also in 1985, they introduced capital gains tax in September. And anyone that owns property prior to September 1985 still as an investment today pays 0 CGT. That's what grandfathering is. That's why I believe they're probably going to do that same thing again. They wouldn't just change it overnight. So unlike negative gearing changes, this policy is going to affect basically every investor. And, for some of those people on the top marginal kind of tax rate, this is about a 33% increase on the CGT that they're paying. It's quite significant. So when we look at the data itself and kind of what we think is going to happen, again, we think people will rush to buy properties so that they're not affected by the change in policy. The biggest thing I think is going to happen is people are going to hold on for dear life for their properties. Yeah. Why would you sell it when now you're going to make less profit? So you'd sit there and go, well, I bought this property. The new tax laws mean I'm going to make less profit or pay more tax on my profit. So I actually now have to hold on to the property for maybe another 3, 5, 10 years more than I would have, just so that I can have that magic number in my head that I've achieved after tax.
Yeah, which is what a lot of investor strategy is.
Yeah. And
wholesale.
That's exactly correct. And so I think that in itself, in a time where the amount of stock available, and if we actually look at the CBRE data that just came out recently.
Awesome.
So the CBRE data that came out recently from their head of Pacific Research said that new supply is set to undershoot historical levels by 20 to 50%.
Not minor.
No, that's a significant amount of a black hole that we're in. And then we're also making policy to stop people from selling properties and minimizing transactions. So all I can see is this will actually create, I dare say, artificial inflation of property prices, because the current way the market is being set up is that you've got more people coming in than you do have people leaving. You've got more buyers than you do have sellers. And you've got policy that is not awarding people for getting rid of their property, but it's actually awarding you for keeping it.
Holding on to it, exactly.
Yeah.
That was only out last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's very recent data. So it's quite scary.
And do you find that the lack of supply in that regard for support on construction, is that something that you see is going to be forming more into, people that are building, selling, or building now holding?
Yeah. So, well, you've got to think about it. If you are a developer and you're building a product and you do 10 projects a year, if you look at it based on, let's just say interest rates going up by itself, the cost of that borrowing that money to do that product is increasing, which means your profit margin has shrunk.
Yeah.
And then if you're also someone, because unfortunately in Australia we don't make anything anymore, you're importing a lot of the products to do that build. And whether it's COVID or the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and meaning it's affecting logistics and product coming into the country is being delayed, that just means that the price of those materials is increasing as well. So all of a sudden, as a developer, you're sitting there going,
what am I doing?
Wow, out of 10 of the projects I was going to do, 6 aren't financially viable anymore.
Yeah.
So then you do less construction. And then when it comes to market, the amount of new products available has shrunk again. So for me, I see that as, again, just another way. And again, people are talking about the Iran conflict. And I know you mentioned, the global events. Remember, during COVID, which happened in 2020, and that was coming off the coattails of the 2017 Royal Commission, when the market just started to come back in 2019.
Yeah.
Then COVID happened and everyone's like, we're doomed. ANZ Bank, a lot of the big banks came out and said, property price is going to fall by 40% easily. Like, just get ready. Josh Frydenberg said unemployment was going to go to 16%. Like, there's a lot of stuff that hit us. You had COVID, you had lockdowns, you had what they called the mortgage cliff. I don't know if you guys remember the mortgage cliff. It was a big thing everyone talked about. So that was going to happen. You had the construction workers cliff because everyone wasn't allowed to go to work. Then you had the Ukraine and Russia. Then you had Israel and Palestine. Then you've had Iran. So you've had all of these huge events, not small, in a 5-year period. What has property done during that time? Did it drop? Did it crash? No, it went up. So when people are like, oh, with this Iran thing, pretty sure that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm like, is it? Or is it just another opportunity? Because again, if that was happening at the same time where we didn't have a deficit of product, where we didn't have a deficit of the amount of skilled labor, where we didn't have an increase in migration, etc., maybe that could be the case. But everything else is propping this market up to say the market will most likely survive, if not thrive.
Yeah, it's one of those things they always say with the property market.
Yeah.
It's not always viable, but a fantastic investment. I've got Anuj. Thank you for your question. And it does go back to CGT.
Okay.
So apologies.
That's fine.
But it is a quick one. It's just about whether or not Providence provides advice on CGT, or if it's just data-backed, like information provided.
That is a great question, Anuj. Thank you. No, we do not. So one of the things that's really probably kept us going for 20 years and allowed us to survive the GFC, Royal Commission, Eurozone crisis, etc., is we really do stick in our lane. So we are a buyer's agent through and through. And this is why we have so many partners who do planning, broking, entity structures, etc., is you're the expert. You tell us this is what the client can borrow, this is where they're at, this is their circumstances. Our job is to sit there and go, how does that description fit into the market? When it comes to things like tax advice, etc., I'm sure all of you have great links to good accountants, good CPAs, etc. Take advantage of those relationships, make them stronger, because, as I said, a lot of it's speculative. I can only give my interpretation as to what I think. I'm not a licensed accountant or anything like that. None of us are. So our job is really just to give the client clarity around some of the rumors that are happening in the media. But when it comes to any specific type of advice like that, that's not specific about just the purchase of the property, please consult a professional, a licensed professional, to make sure you get the best advice possible.
I always think that the data-backed decisions are always really important. And with how much data you guys have access to, like you were working on some data from last week about the current property prices and where they will. Yeah,
so we can go to that if you like, actually. That's pretty good stuff. So the new data from Cotality, which was CoreLogic, came out on the Friday the 1st. So this data is very fresh. And this is the Hedonic Home Value Index. This is a free document, by the way, that you can get from Cotality every single month. You don't even need to be subscribed. I know, I'm sure all of you are anyway, but it's a great document because it really does give you an understanding. And this is my reality check document because there's so much rumor or opinion disguising itself as fact in the market these days that it's really important to push that away and say, well, what's going on? So you can see here, and this is some really interesting stuff, the median dwelling value on the far right-hand corner there in that green little box across the combined capital cities is currently $1,031,838. So that's what's a dwelling? House, townhouse, unit, duplex, anything that you could live in is a dwelling. That's the median dwelling value. It doesn't mean you can't buy something for less than that. It's just that's what the average kind of price is. And now if you look at the performers, you can see Perth is just defying gravity for me. It is just doing some amazing stuff. It's up 2.1% again. It's up 26% for the year. So that is 30th of April 2025 to 30th of April 2026. So that's a significant increase. The total return column is capital growth plus rental yield. So you've got a 31% odd return on that, and it's reached $1 million. It did 2 months ago. And now it's at $1,039,949. Second place is Darwin. We don't touch Darwin. We're not interested in Darwin. I think Darwin is a great place if you've got a huge portfolio and you don't mind a bit of risk. But for us, again, it just doesn't qualify as a proper capital city with enough catalyst for population growth, employment drivers, etc. So for us, even though it's second, it's not something we're really touching. Brisbane's very attractive. Anecdotally, you've got the Olympics coming in 2032.
A lot of infrastructure that's being...
Correct. So a lot of stuff that's going in there. Is the Olympics specifically a catalyst that's going to move the market? Probably not. But anecdotally, people are feeling much more confident with Brisbane. And I remember when people looked at Brisbane the way they're looking at Melbourne now, during the Palaszczuk government, they had heaps of youth crime. Grand theft auto was a massive thing there. They're letting people out on bail the same day. The same stuff I'm hearing people complain about Melbourne, they complained about that in Brisbane. And Brisbane's done fantastically well, up 1.2% last month, 19.7% for the year, currently at $1,016,180. So that's first, second, and third. But just before I go to the next slide, the important thing about this is that you've got Sydney in first place at nearly $1.3 million. That's median dwelling value. Remember, houses will be more expensive, units will be a bit cheaper. And then you've got second place being Brisbane at $1.16 million. That's second place. Third place is Perth at $1,040,000. Fourth place is going to be Adelaide at $944,000. Fifth place is Canberra at almost $900,000. And sixth place is Melbourne at $823,000 now, which blows my mind because this is going to be the most populated city in our country. It is one of the most livable cities in the world. It has one of the most diversified economies, but it's having a rough go at the moment. And people, I think, are sleeping on Melbourne a little bit, the same way they slept on Perth for quite some time. But again, when you see that data, it's quite sobering.
I've actually got a good question in relation to Melbourne data.
Sure.
In front. So from Jacob, thank you. How do you view the current apartment investor crisis in Melbourne? So there's a lot of investors that are holding stock, hasn't appreciated, oversupply is making it increasingly difficult to sell.
Yeah, it's a great question because, again, vacancy rates are a huge indicator as to where you should and should not buy. And I remember going to the Docklands years ago, before COVID, for a conference there near the casino, and I was at the Docklands. I was in a unit there for 2 nights, and I remember going there, and I went up to somebody at a desk, and I said, "I'm here to pick up my key," and she's like, "Oh, this is not a concierge. This is not what we do." And there was a guy waiting, and he had an iPad, and he came up to me and he said, "Is your name Jay Pace?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I've got your room ready for you," and I was like, what's going on? And what I realized, this guy then took me to a mailbox, opened it up. He had a set of keys on him, and he had all these different mailboxes that he was managing with keys in there. And he was doing an Airbnb style thing that was off the books. So he was just like, "Yep, no worries, Ben, we'll do this, we'll do that." And took me up. And I remember I had a car spot, but I had to drive up about 9 levels of this circular car park. And I thought, this is a crazy design for a building. And this is insane. And we had clients during COVID who were living in Melbourne, in the Docklands and in some of those areas. And they were like, "Oh, we're moving house today." I said, "Oh, where are you moving to?" And they said, "Oh, we're just moving 3 levels up, we're in a 2-bedroom unit and we're going to rent this 3-bedroom unit and it's $50 less than the 2-bedroom unit I'm currently in at the moment.
Wow.
So people were in a position where there's just so much supply that renters were able to take advantage of that. I think that if you're in a massive building, I think it's just going to take such a long time for that to wash through. That's just what's happening. And this is why density levels of buildings is so significant when we're looking at buying a property. I've got nothing against unit blocks. If it's the old school red brick style, white brick style, walk-ups, no elevators, no gymnasium, no pool, no strata readers, no underground car park, those are gold. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're in these multi-level buildings with massive amounts of strata readers, etc., we just stay away from them. We've never bought them. So if you're in it, you're in for the long haul, or you just need to sit there and go, if I get out of this now and then I reinvest that money, is that a smarter move than just sitting in and holding onto this asset? Yeah. That's exactly right. So we do see a lot of clients do that. It's a difficult decision to make, but this is why you need a good investment analyst or buyer's agent to sit there and look at your product and say, well, over that period of time, what do you think is actually going to happen? So I think that's it. But I do think from a unit perspective, I think units are only going to get more expensive. And the reason I think that is because the pendulum has swung from people buying further and further and further away from the CBDs.
And they're getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, where the product's getting small. In Sydney, as an example, and I'm only saying Sydney because I'm from Sydney, but in Sydney, you've got properties in Box Hill, which is about 45 odd Ks from the CBD, that are being built on 280 square metre blocks for $1.7 million.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see people going, well, I might as well just live in Chatswood or a good suburb where I've got the amenities, I've got the community, I've got the infrastructure. Yeah, I've only got 2 bedrooms, but I don't need a small backyard because I've got a park downstairs. Exactly. I've got shops downstairs. I've got this. So definitely, I think that will change because I know as a father of 2 young daughters, no matter how much money I make, I still think my daughters are going to be living in units. That's just going to be the reality for it. So if the next generation is most likely going to be living in units, I think it's not a silly idea to start looking at them as a potential investment opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. Beautiful. Thank you for that. That was awesome, Jacob. I've got a few questions here on fee structure. Is that something you want to go through?
Yeah, sure. Just before we go through that, I just wanted to take this data and go to the next level. So when you do have clients that are sitting there that are just taking a bit of time to buy a property, what I do is I take the median dwelling value and then I take the annual performance. And then what I do is I convert that into a dollar amount so I can understand and quote to the client how much the market's actually gone up. Because when you tell a client market in Brisbane's gone up 19.7%, what does that mean for them? Not a lot. Awesome. But when I actually explain that's $220,000 of increase in the last 12 months, they're like, okay, well, that's a real number, nearly $250,000. And then I divide that number by 52 weeks in the year. And then I show the client that every week out of that 90-day pre-approval or 12 weeks that you had, that you didn't buy a property, you now have to pay an additional $4,200. Yeah. And that hits clients like a ton of bricks because they sit there and they go, wow, like this is actually costing me a lot of money. So some of the best techniques I've seen brokers do is take this data and at the end of the pre-approval, not in a snarky way or an arrogant way, hit the client and say, do you know how much the market's moved up since I did your pre-approval? Yeah. Because if you hit them with a percentage, it's not going to mean a lot. But if you go, just letting you know, in the last 12 weeks that you've done this, the property market in the area you've been looking at has gone up over $40,000. And you told me that you were at that auction and it sold for 20 grand more than what it was worth. Just think about that. Yeah. Or you didn't want to use a buyer's agent because you didn't want to pay them $20,000 or whatever it may have been to do the job, but you've just spent an additional 40 grand just in keeping up with the market. And for clients, once they see these numbers and they see in alphabetical order that Adelaide did 2,200 a week, Brisbane did 4,200 a week, Melbourne did 300 a week, and it's going down. So it's still positive, but it's going down in regards to every month I do these numbers, it's getting slower. Perth did $5,200 per week. And there's 30% less stock in Perth today than there was the same time last year. So nearly a third of their stock is gone. And in Sydney, it's doing $1,000 a week. And like I said to you before, the data shows the average Aussie is going to take 40 weeks to buy a property or 10 months. So I just take this data and I times it by 40 weeks and I tell the client, are you prepared to pay X amount more for the property you rejected today in 10 months' time? And all of them say no.
No.
And I say, well, that's the reality of your situation. So again, looking at that data, I think is very important just to ground clients into how much it's actually costing them, because clients, in my opinion, have an attitude of, I'm in no rush.
Yeah, it's an emotional decision, I think, when you're either investing or buying, but when you put some rationale behind it of actual numbers and this is what it's costing you, sometimes that emotion's stronger than I want different flashback tiles. I want it to be this way with the driveway. I think that's really important to use and as a tool for a broker as well.
And this is actually in the qualification questions that we will send you, like how to do this. And I actually give you the instructions on not only how to do the calculation, but also how you can go to free websites that will give you suburb data specific, and you can actually hit your client and say, you're looking in Balmain, this is how much Balmain's going up per week. Like, you can really hit them in a place where the client has no excuse, where they've got all the information they need. And as I said, it's just the best tool to get that client to actually take some action, or to realize after you've given them that data and they don't take action, this person isn't taking this seriously. So why am I taking it so seriously?
Awesome. No, thank you for that. So I do have questions on whether or not Providence focus on commercial as well as residential, or if you're predominantly residential.
That's a great question. We don't do commercial anymore. We used to. There's so much more involved with commercial, hazmat reports, etc. I think buying commercial is great, by the way. Personally, I like commercial. Buying something as a going concern is good, not having to pay GST. I'm all about missing out on some tax. I think all that stuff's great. But as a company, I think if you have a client looking for a commercial property, go to a commercial buyer's agent. If you have a client looking for residential property, go to a resi buyer's agent. If you have a client looking for something specific, go to someone that specializes in it. And we just find staying in our lane allows us to become not just experts, but really industry leaders in buying existing residential property in capital cities, instead of guys that are just pretty good at what they do.
Yeah, awesome. I love that, subject matter experts. Thank you for that question. And fee structure.
Fee structure. So majority of buyer's agents charge the same way. And when I say the same way, one of my huge pet peeves is where I've seen a lot of videos lately on Instagram, and obviously I'm a glutton for punishment because I obviously watch them enough, so my algorithm keeps throwing them at me, of people that go, this is why buyer's agents suck. They get paid by developers. And as soon as I hear that, I'm like, that's not a buyer's agent. Any client of yours that's saying that they're working with someone that is getting paid by a developer or off the plan, that's not a buyer's agent. In fact, the definition would be they're a seller's advocate, because what they're doing is they're being paid by the seller, not by the buyer. Buyer's agent explicitly gets paid by the buyer and nobody else. So the first thing is important is understand the definition, because every now and then we'll get a client that will hear what we're charging and go, well, these other guys are only charging me $2,000. And I realize it's an engagement fee before they sell them an off the plan property and they get paid a $30,000 commission. And again, I've got nothing against off the plan. If that's what you want to do, go for it. And for a lot of clients that we have that are from overseas that don't yet have residency or citizenship, it's the only avenue for them to buy properties. But I would say 95 plus, probably more than that % of our clients are all citizens and they all buy established property with us. The way that we charge is, and I think probably one of the better things to do is explain the process and the charge together, because I think that will make a little bit more sense. So if I just go here, this is kind of your client experience with Providence as a company. So at the top, you'll see email introduction to Providence. So we recommend highly that if you have a client that seems like they're happy to have a discussion with us, send us an email. We'll give you the template that you can use that doesn't make you promise the world and deliver them an atlas, and kind of just explains these guys are a buyer's agent, been around since 2006. We've done some work with them. You might want to have a chat with them. That's it. And we always ask for the client's email address and phone number, because if the client's not willing to give you the phone number, they're probably not interested, right? Exactly. So we give you a template, you fill that out. We organize an online meeting with the client, typically within 24 hours. So we have a team that's monitoring all those emails, and they send the client links to our calendar. Once the client organizes a meeting, then myself, Lynton, or one of the other directors speaks to the client. The client will never speak to a salesperson. And even if the client wants Brisbane as an example, the client won't then speak to one of my buyer's agents in Brisbane, because they will be biased because they love Brisbane because that's where they live. So the client actually has to come to the Sydney office first. And we've got a lot of knowledge about all the states, because before we got to this stage, being 20 years old, Lynton and I used to jump on planes and go around the country and go and buy properties, and we were the guys doing that. But once we got to a certain level, we were able to, hire people and do that. But because of that, luckily for us, we've had that on the ground experience. So we know those suburbs, we know those LGAs. Once the client has a discussion with us, it's all about giving them that reality check, understanding their goals, their circumstances, and their history with property. After we've weeded all of that out, we actually summarize that entire meeting with the client and give them the directions on how they should move forward next. We CC you into that summary, so you'll see the entire discussion we've actually had with the client, which makes it very transparent. The one thing, and Lynton and I always try to remind people about this, there's no guarantee the client's going to work with us.
Of course.
But the guarantee that I can give you is after one meeting with myself or Lynton or one of the other directors, the probability of the client taking action and purchasing something will go up tenfold. Why? Because in one meeting with us, based on all the data that we have, and we're not shy about sharing it, the client will have a better understanding of the market and their position than what they would have in 10 months of scrolling social media and looking at the news. So that's the guarantee I can give you, is that they will end up doing something, or you'll realize they're never doing something, and then you can cut them. After we do that, then if the client decides they want to work with us, so this is about the fees, the client will sign a buyer's agency agreement, which gives them a 4-month exclusivity clause. So the client's with us for 4 months if they want to be. No client ever really is with us for that long, because our team is very efficient. They're looking 6 days a week, and they've been doing this for a long time. They know the markets. But we give the client a 4-month exclusivity agreement to not let them think that we're rushing them in any way about buying a property. Once the client sees the data, the client typically is the one that rushes because they realize how much money it's costing them. Once the client signs, they pay a $2,700 engagement fee plus GST. So let's call it about $3,000 is the engagement fee, which is non-refundable once they pay it. Then we sit down with the client, we create a purchase brief, very similar to the way a financial planner would do a statement of advice. Obviously, it's not a statement of advice, but I'm just saying it's got all the data in there that the client needs. Same structure, likes, dislikes, must-haves, risk levels, everything that we kind of need. Then we pass that document on to the buyer's agent who's local to the area where we're going to buy the property for the client. So we give them all of that information. We do a handover meeting with the buyer's agent. And from there, the buyer's agent starts the job of locating, assessing, and negotiating. They're the main 3 responsibilities of that buyer's agent. We set up the communication with a WhatsApp group, a Trello board, and an email. So the client's in constant communication with the buyer's agent. A lot of these clients are buying in locations they know nothing about personally, or they've never visited. So we need to let them understand crime statistics. They need to understand demographics, in income stats. They need to understand schools, NAPLAN schools, all the things that we now have. So we then get them that information and suburb data. Once we have come to a stage where we understand the price of something, we're happy with it, we make an offer and that offer is accepted, the client will unconditionally exchange on the contract. After they unconditionally exchange on the contract, they will be invoiced for a success fee. The success fee is the second and last fee Providence charge them after the engagement. It's additional to the engagement, and it is between 1.7 to 2%, or it is a flat fee. They're both on there, so you'll see that. Depends on what the client's kind of comfortable with, but that's on there as well, and that kind of helps the client get to that next stage. After that, we do the pre and post settlement purchase process. That's, if they are an investor, it's typically things like picking up the keys, introducing them to a rental manager, insurance company, quantity surveyor, etc. If the broker already has those relationships, they just let us know and they introduce them to their people. It doesn't affect us. Our job really, if I can summarize it, is to make sure that we are the concierge from start to finish of the client's journey. The biggest problem and the reason why people don't buy properties is because they don't dedicate the time. And once they have a buyer's agent that can take them by the hand and say, we're doing this today, we're doing that today, I need you to get back to me on this property, I need your thoughts on that property, it speeds that process up. And it typically takes our clients less than a month to buy a property instead of it taking them 40 weeks.
Yeah.
That's the last thing. And then after that, the last thing is that we contact the client after 3 months after settlement to check in, and then every 12 months until they tell us to leave them alone, updating them on how the property has performed. We just did a campaign, I'll just tell you guys now, recently, where we contacted our alumni clients because I believe that these changes to negative gearing and CGT is going to create a really great opportunity. And we went back with reports to all of our clients as to how much money we've made you over the last 5, 10 plus years. And that was quite sobering for those clients. We got a few bottles of wine sent to us, which is nice. And so we sent them those emails. And then after we sent them that, we said, do you want to have a meeting with me? And my diary, I mean, you guys saw the way I do my calendar. My diary is full of meetings with clients like that who are now going, this seems like a good opportunity. What should we do next? So the majority of our clients will buy 3 properties within a 5-year period.
Awesome. Let's have a good experience. And one time they go, well, let's do it again.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. There is a question here about providing assistance with buying in an SMSF. I'm going to say here, I can confidently say that you guys are strictly buyers agents, residential property. The SMSF side is where you come in as a broker, as a subject matter expert on the lending side.
Mm-hmm.
And with SMSF, you're going to be leaning on your accountants, financial planners, SMSF auditors to help within an SMSF. I think for you guys, it doesn't matter if they're buying an individual company, whatever.
Yeah, we don't care how you're buying it. Yeah, as long as you've got the assets set up. I do warn, and I'm sure brokers all know this, different states have all different legislations, which is very frustrating. And with just the naming of the SMSF can be a nightmare. We've had to take specific steps to make sure that the wording is exactly as it needs to be, to make sure that the client's deal goes through correctly. So we've consulted so many people about this, but yes, we love SMSF purchases. They're usually deposit heavy. They're focusing on a slightly higher rental yield. They usually want younger product because they don't want a huge amount of maintenance on something where they can't borrow for a construction loan in an SMSF. So it very much dictates the type of product that we do. But we love SMSF. We think it's a great way to create wealth in that long term. And I'm not upset about, at the moment, not paying tax on CGT on properties that I sell later on in life. So that's always a good thing.
Beautiful. I love that you have not the SMSF side of it, but what best asset will fit an SMSF customer. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And one last one as well. Do you apply the same logic to the Melbourne market where prices are decreasing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, you don't just want to buy in markets where the market is going insane. Like in Perth, we've been buying in Perth for a long time. We made a lot of money for our clients. We're very happy in Brisbane as well, in Sydney, in Melbourne, at different times. Everyone has to remember the market is cyclical. So it's not, when someone says, how's the Australian market doing? I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
which part?
Yeah, which part are you talking about? And then which product are you talking about? And we're talking about regional, rural, or capital city. Like there's so many facets to it, and there's markets within markets. So for us, it's just all about understanding what are the drivers. And when I look at a place like Melbourne, where I personally invested just late last year, is because I look at it and I go, would I put my money there and why? And the reason I just mentioned that is because all of our buyers agents look at product as in, would I buy this? Does this make sense for me? Because again, our business is referral only. We don't advertise or anything like that. In the 20 years we've been going, we haven't spent anything on advertising. And I think the reason we do that is because the clients have a good experience. And also the feedback that we typically get from clients is it wasn't about the properties they brought to me, it's about the properties they told me not to buy.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing for us, is what we reject. And when we have a quick look just at the feedback that we get, we got hundreds of reviews on Google, so please go and check those out. I've made them look a little bit prettier here, but it's just, you'll see that that's a common theme of people just going, it's not what they presented to me, it's what they told me not to buy. So I think that's super important. I think Melbourne's a great opportunity. I think if we look at the data just in the last 5 years as an example, and I'm sorry if I'm making anyone dizzy with the speed, but if we look at the data in the last 5 years, across the combined capital cities, we've seen a 33.7% average increase in price, which is fine. In Perth, we saw 92.1, in Brisbane, 84, and in Adelaide, 77.4. That's in 5 years. In 10 years to the right, Brisbane did 119.5, Adelaide did 111.4, and Perth did 107.5. Over that 10 years, the average capital city increased by 69.3%. Melbourne's done 36.9, which is not good. In the last 5 years, with the average capital city increasing by 33.7, Melbourne's done 5.8. So I sit there and I think to myself, how is a capital city that's going to have the largest population in our country, which means the largest amount of demand on supply, and has a lot of other economic things going for it in regards to its diversified economy, etc., with an election coming up in November, and I can't imagine Jacinta Allen's going to keep her job. I sit there and I say, this market has the highest probability of significant capital growth. And If people are like, well, no, I don't think that's going to happen. That's the same argument we gave for Perth back in 2020. It's the same argument we gave back for Brisbane in 2017, 2018. And look at how they have performed. So for me, I think Melbourne's a great opportunity. Lynton, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah. I just want to just jump in there because I guess what a lot of people aren't seeing at the moment, which we are seeing, is that in Melbourne now, you're essentially buying the land and getting the house for free. It's that cheap. To give you an example, we bought a few weeks back. There was a block of land sold 465 square meters for 805,000, and we bought for 920,000 a 5 bedroom, 2 bathroom house on a larger block in the same suburb. So in Melbourne at the moment, something's happening that hasn't happened in decades, and that is that property prices are so cheap relative to how much it now costs to build a property. So for that person who bought the block of land for $805,000, they'd have to spend $750,000 to buy a new house on it. Why would you do it? It doesn't make any sense. So it's an incredible time now to get into Melbourne and realize, you're buying the land and getting the house for free. And I just think it's a once in a generation sort of period that we're seeing now that because the build costs are so high, the opportunity to buy is incredibly affordable.
That's brilliant. I think Melbourne's one of those ones that's going to have to be on the watch list for us. I have another question around it. I'm just mindful that it is 3 past 1.
That's okay. I've got time if everyone else does.
Beautiful. So thank you, Anuj. With Melbourne, I know we've got a lot of data on property prices, growth. Do you also look into the infrastructure penciled for Melbourne, looking at locations and suburbs where investing in the property would make sense based on future infrastructure plans?
100%. So understanding where the money is going to be spent and where the jobs are going to be created. Because like I said before, one of the reasons we don't really love regional is because employment is the main catalyst for population growth. People don't move to a location if they don't think they're going to get a job.
Yeah.
So for us, it's understanding where is that infrastructure going in? What does that employment opportunity look like? How many people are most likely going to go there? This is where it gets dangerous when people start to look at hotspots. And when people start to look at gentrifying suburbs. And when we hear these buzzwords, we always get a little bit scared because, again, for us, it's about long-term data. And a lot of people will buy in locations where if I go back prior to COVID, the data in that area is almost non-existent because it was a farmland.
Yeah, and it's been because of the...
That's right. And then they get 5 years of data and they go, look at the performance. It's been 10% per annum. And it's like, yeah, but that's because you're looking at a 5-year kind of horizon for that. And at the end of the day, that's not going to average out over 30 years to be 10% per annum.
Exactly.
So for us, understanding that's super important. Having the data is important, but also having the buyer's agents who are local in those areas are important. So when I get a client that wants north, south, east, or west, or if I get a client that has no clue, but based on their budget, we know that the north's going to be better for them, the west is going to be better for them, etc. We then allocate the buyer's agent who's local in that area, who knows the area.
Has a specialty in that.
That's right, because you want that local hero that understands that market, but also as well, you can't underestimate relationships. And with buyer's agents, one of the big things and the reasons why our conversations with clients is with real estate agents is so different is because when they look at an individual purchaser, they see this person as one transaction, one and done. So whether they're good, not good, doesn't matter. One transaction, I'll never see you again. When they have a buyer's agent approach them about a property, they see this person as a potential alliance partner, as someone that's going to potentially feed them with multiple transactions. And they also sit there and go, this person knows the market, knows the pricing, is licensed to sell property as well. So straight away, the dynamic changes. Instead of it me against them, it's I've got my client, you got your client. How can we together bring these people to make a deal that makes sense? And agents are conflicted in that respect because if the agent's trying to get an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for sale price, that's only worth maybe a couple $100 or $1,000 in commission for them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if the agent does right by us and we get the property at a price that we believe is reasonable, they're sitting there going, well, I'm never going to see that vendor again. Do I really want to push for that extra 20K that I don't think is realistic anyway? Or do I want to make a deal with this company that's been around for 20 years that does hundreds of purchases every couple of months? Does that seem like it makes more sense to me? So that's what really helps us, again, create that more streamlined process with people, because we've got agents that we've been working with for decades now that just understand this makes sense.
No, that's amazing. And I think it also helps with brokers that are trying to get those quicker answers to yes, whether it's from a lender, whether it's from a customer making a decision. That's all the questions I've got through, and I am mindful of time. And thank you for everyone for staying on. This has been absolutely informative. Thank you, Jay and Lynton. The insights you guys have and the data always blows my mind.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out an email tomorrow with all of the information covered today and your CPD point information. If you've got any follow-up questions, you can reach out to your MA Money BDM. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.